Hello, and welcome to the Vicars Watch Dibley,
the podcast where real priests talk about pop culture and what we've learnt about faith, life and the church. We've watched Dibley, and now we're watching everything else. I'm Kate.
I'm Ross.
And I'm Vreethy, and today we are talking about Blackadder. We have watched an episode from the first series of Blackadder, where Blackadder is made Archbishop. So we talk a little bit about all things Blackadder, about the joy of vestments, and how does one become an Archbishop.
Well, a holy happy hello to you all.
Hello!
Hello!
We're in our vicarages, and you're listening in. We're ready and raring to talk about Blackadder. But first, we've got a couple of notices. So, over to you, Ruthie. I think we've had some mail.
We have. Feels like we're a proper podcast where we get mail from listeners, doesn't it? We had a message from the wonderful Kirsty, who is someone we know because you guys trained with her, didn't you?
Yeah,
you
Mama Kirsty.
And yeah, and my partner Nat, she lived on the same floor as Kirsty for a year, and she sent a really lovely message, which was really, really encouraging and wonderful, because Kirsty's just like that. And yeah, we just thought we'd read out some of what she said to us. And this is what she said. Someone asked me recently why we had a splash of water to the communion wine. And I admit, it's something I'd never really thought about. I've been delving into the whys, and as I listened to your words today, God gave me the image of me feeding his people through the bread and wine and a touch of water at the communion rail with his abundant love, shown in the abundance of the wine outpoured in the miracle of the wedding at Cana in Galilee. So, yes, in the Eucharist, God reveals himself in the incarnation and the passion of Christ through bread and wine and a splash of water. It's Emmanuel, God with us, revealing himself abundantly to us around the table where we use water and wine, but also in the words of others. Just as yours have led me to this new revealing of the meaning of Jesus' first miracle with water and wine. I hope I'm making sense. And absolutely, you are making sense, Kirsty.
Yeah.
And it's lovely when we get messages like this where we think, oh, actually, you guys are theologically reflecting along with us. And so why do we add a splash of water into the wine? Can you remember?
Well, I think there's a couple of ways that you can go about it. I think the straight down the line answer, I think Ross agrees with me on this, is because when Jesus' side was pierced on the cross, it ran with water rather than blood.
No, it was blood and water.
No,
it was blood and water.
water.
Sorry, yes,
Yeah.
correct. But then also, as Kirsty indicated, Jesus' first miracle, his first public miracle, was at the wedding at Cana in Galilee, in which he turned water into wine. So there's something there as well, which we pick up on. And I did, when we were discussing this before the episode, I came up with a slight kind of blasé joke answer, was just in sheer practicality, maybe it was started as our economy.
We're just a bit tight.
How much are you watering down your wine where you are, Kate? My goodness.
Not much, except there
Unacceptable.
are some churches where the wine is just really, really strong, so you really do need... Because for it to be shelf-stable, it has a really high alcohol content, the wine.
It does indeed.
So that you're not pulling a face when you're receiving the blood of Christ, it is helpful to have it diluted a little.
I know churches that do it half and half.
Does that mean, wait a second, does that mean we're essentially saying that communion wine is like Ribena that we need to dilute? No, we're not saying.
You're going back to Dibley. But yeah, I know some churches that have done half water, half wine. But as someone who has previously lived in France, darling, I lived in France. Did you know about that?
Oh, you lived in France?
Watering down wine is just an unacceptable behaviour. And so just a splash of water for the symbolism. Thank you very much.
I like that, Kirsty. Thank you for the splash of water.
Yes, thank you very much.
I remember there's a hymn, Soul of my Saviour, Sanctify my breast. And that talks about blood of my Saviour, bathe me in thy tide, wash me with water flowing from his side. So if you are deep into Eucharistic theology, then there is something about the wound of Christ giving you both blood and water that sustains us.
On a much less holy thing, we've also had some fun whilst drinking wine this week, haven't we, Ross? What have we been up to?
Well, it was one of our birthdays recently. Kate celebrated her birthday, and we had a little Vicars Watch Dibley podcast party.
We did.
We met up online and we played Sexy Battle Wizards.
Yes, we did.
Kate, tell us all about Sexy Battle Wizards.
Sexy Battle Wizards is a one-page, one-shot, zero prep, role-playing game. It's a bit like Dungeons and Dragons, where you have one person who is acting as game master, who's kind of shepherding the story along, and everyone else creates a character to basically cause chaos and go against all of the game master's plans. It was a lot of fun. It was
great.
It was really
got
good fun.
So camp so quickly.
Listeners, did you expect anything less of us?
Yes, and it is my preferred way to celebrate birthdays, pretending to be somewhere else and being someone else. I used to always have murder mystery parties, and I think this is very much along the same line.
Yeah. We said about doing a podcast about Dungeons and Dragons. Maybe we should bump that one up. And
well, I think when the Dungeons and Dragons movie sequel comes out, I think that's one we need to.
Is there a sequel coming out?
I believe so.
Good. It's an amazing film.
Will there be more?
I might just be wishful thinking. It might
Yeah.
just be wishful thinking, but I'm pretty sure I've heard that there will be a sequel.
Maybe we should do a Vicar of Dibley RPG one shot.
Yes.
Listeners, would you like that?
Would be good. Please say yes if we want to do it. So, yeah, we've had some fun this week, haven't we?
We have
It's
had
been
fun.
good.
And talking of fun, this week we're going to be talking about one of my favourite comedy series.
Yeah, so, Kate, you brought us this session an episode of Blackadder. Now, we were watching Series 1, Episode 3. There are 4 series of it. Kate, tell us a bit about Blackadder.
So, Blackadder is a British sitcom series starring Rowan Atkinson, Tony Robinson. Later series have Hugh Laurie in it and Stephen Fry. Some really big names in British comedy. Co-written by Rowan Atkinson and Richard Curtis, who also wrote The Vicar of Dibley.
Oh, cool.
And Ben Elton was also involved, I believe, as well. So it's kind of that same lineage of comedy as A Vicar of Dibley and the same time period. So first series was released in 1983. Ran for the late 80s, so just before Vicar of Dibley, really. And each series tackles a different historical period, or maybe pseudo-historical period, where there's a sort of sense that they are taking history, and particularly the first series, Shakespeare, and twisting it up and kind of creating an alternate timeline, maybe. So the first series is sort of medieval. The second series is Elizabethan. The third series is Regency, and the final series is then set in World War One. And yeah, each series has very different vibes as well, but it's all based on wordplay and references to things that people would have learnt in school, in that particular academic comedian circuit of people who were coming out of Cambridge footlights. So, history, Shakespeare, that sort of thing.
Growing up, haven't watched it like all the way through, but I've seen the odd episode here and there from Regency time and particularly the World War One series 4, and the final episode that they have, which is a really sort of moving end season. But you proper grew up with it, didn't you, Kate?
Yeah, so I used to work as a youth worker. So after my A-levels, I took a gap year to work as a youth worker. And my boss, the kind of chief youth worker, he really liked Blackadder, and he liked his Padawans, as he called us, to really get on with Blackadder, to the point where he would quiz us on Blackadder quotes. He would start a quote and we had to finish it and then say which episode it came from, which season it came from. Which actually is a bit easier than you'd imagine it would be, because each episode is quite distinct. And Blackadder is extremely quotable. Even if you're not into Blackadder, you've probably heard things like, "I've got a cunning plan," which is a Blackadder phrase. Often then followed with, "Is it as cunning as a fox who has a doctorate from Oxford University in cunningness," or something like that. So yes, I used to watch it a lot. I have a particular memory of during that, it was the summer before that gap year, and we were going on a residential, and one of the nights was going to be a medieval themed night, and we had to dress up in our best medieval dress, and I all-nighted making my own medieval dress while watching Blackadder.
You are a proper fan.
Ruthie, what's your experience of Blackadder?
Very limited, actually. Before this, I think I've only seen one full episode before, which is the final episode of the World War One season, which is season 4, is it?
Yes, it's season 4.
Which we watched as part of, because I studied World War One poetry in English literature, and so we watched that as part of it.
I think that's why I watched it as well.
Is it?
Yeah.
So I've seen that one, but I think I kind of have seen clips of the medieval ones, because there's one with Queen Elizabeth, isn't there, as well as this series?
That's series 2, yeah.
The series that we watched. I didn't realise there was a Regency one at all. I didn't.
Series 3 is the one where Hugh Laurie plays Prince George. And if you're used to Hugh Laurie from things like House, and you're used to him being quite serious and grim,
very different.
He is high camp as Prince George and sheer stupidity. And he kind of, one of his running gags is about wearing really big trousers and being in search of like the biggest trousers.
Oh, right, okay.
It's all... Guys, you have to watch it. Highly recommend. The first series of Blackadder, called The Blackadder, it's harder to get into unless maybe you're particularly familiar with some of the Shakespearean history plays. But series 2, which is the Elizabethan one, they really kind of find their stride.
Yeah.
That's the portrayal of Queen Elizabeth. Queenie is just so unhinged. It's incredible. And it's from season 2 where they solidify this character where Blackadder is really the sane one, surrounded
amongst
by
the chaos.
People who are going super off the rails.
Yeah.
Whereas the first series, he's as bad as everyone else.
Well, you've given us an episode from that
but
first
I have
season.
given you an episode from the first series. And the reason I chose this is because in it, Blackadder gets made Archbishop of Canterbury.
Excellent.
In a very corrupt manner. And there's a bit of discussion about the medieval church and sort of the things they were doing to make money. All surrounded just in capers and hijinks. There is an episode in Blackadder 2, so the second season of Blackadder, which has a character called the baby-eating Bishop of Bath and Wells.
Oh, yes, I've heard of that.
Who you may also have heard of. So I could have chosen that as well, but I thought we could have a better conversation based off this episode, which is called The Archbishop.
Okay.
We'll save baby-eating bishops for another episode.
Yeah. The only babies we eat are jelly babies.
I could really do some jelly babies right now.
Oh, yeah. I've thought about jelly babies.
So, season 1, episode 3, The Archbishop. What did you make of it, Ruthie?
Well, I was immediately pleased to see Brian Blessed in there, who is just a larger-than-life character. And
can I say, a bit of a dish.
he is in this. He's rather handsome. I probably know him best from Flash Gordon.
Yeah.
Where he's just this louder than life character, isn't he? Just in anything that he plays. Yeah, and it shows a lot of the infighting that's going on in the church, and the king keeps making these archbishops, doesn't he, and then starts killing them off. And there's this whole thing at the beginning about being around lords who are dying and encouraging them to sign off their lands to the king. But the church is there also going, oh, you don't want to go to hell, you better sign off your lands to the church.
Yeah.
And this is the kind of main
and the bishops
conflict,
say
isn't
things
it?
like, yeah, the bishops say things like, hell, where Satan belches fire and enormous devils break wind both night and day. Hell, where the mind is never free from the torments of remorse and your bottom never free from the pricking of little forks.
Well,
Oh, spare me the little forks.
Exactly.
I do just want to say, listeners, that Kate literally just quoted that,
Yeah.
like, off the top of her head. Like, this
No, I
was...
didn't.
did you
Oh,
have
did you
notes?
not? Okay, can't.
I have the script up in front of me.
Oh,
Okay, we can
you
cut that.
There
bamboozled
was a
us.
time I might have been able to quote that, but no.
But yeah, the whole thing in this episode is about the king choosing the archbishop. And we'll go on to the kind of realities of that later on. But the king keeps choosing archbishops, and they keep dying in mysterious circumstances, don't they? That are just accidents in inverted commas. And so Blackadder is really keen that his brother becomes archbishop. Is that right?
Yes.
The Blackadder is one of the princes, and there is also Prince Harry.
Yes. So this is where we're in pseudo history, where the king, who is King Richard IV, there has never been a King Richard.
I was going to
IV.
say what?
He's one of the princes that was locked in the tower, if you know history. And the
Oh,
idea
okay.
is that he actually his uncle was a good man, and so he actually became king, and then had these two sons, Harry and Edmund. And King Richard doesn't like his younger son and never remembers his name.
Oh.
And Edmund is the Blackadder.
Edmund is Blackadder, and the Blackadder is this kind of identity he has created for himself, kind of a nickname, which then the idea is it becomes the surname of his descendants or whatever.
Okay.
But
Yeah. And it's played by Rowan Atkinson, who is well versed in playing priests by this point, isn't he? He's played many a priest. So maybe this was the start of it, him becoming the Archbishop of Canterbury. But he isn't actually a priest, is he?
No, he's a prince.
And then he gets made Archbishop.
Yes, and a prince who doesn't necessarily believe in God. In fact, one of the reasons he thinks that his brother Harry will be chosen is because Harry is the one who believes in God.
I mean, one would think that would be a bit of a prerequisite, really, wouldn't you?
Well, you know.
But no, the king wants to have an archbishop who is in his pocket, and so he says he's finally found a use for this younger son, and very much forces Edmund into it.
And historically, that is somewhat accurate, isn't it? Because there was an archbishop who was made. Is it Thomas?
Becket.
Thomas Becket. He was.
It's not Thomas Becket, no.
Who was it?
He was born in Cheapside.
It's one of them who was not ordained at all and was made Archbishop of Canterbury. So was ordained
Maybe
deacon, priest, and archbishop all in one service. So it's not totally unusual.
Maybe. So sorry, I've got the wiki page for Becket up because they touch on Becket's assassination in this episode. Becket was ordained priest on the 2nd of June, 1162, and on the 3rd of June he was consecrated as archbishop.
Yeah.
So yes.
So he was chosen as he was in the pocket of the king, wasn't he? And he was chosen to be archbishop because the king was like, well, he won't do anything to mess about with it. I'm already having enough difficulties with the church. This is totally like Cliff Notes. If you're a proper historian, I'm really sorry for what I'm saying right now. But then actually he got really into it, didn't he? And whether it was the faith aspect or the power aspect that he particularly loved, he is a saint, isn't he? And so
I got into trouble in my previous parish for saying something. I think for sort of erring on the side of Thomas Becket being a good guy. But then a historian in my congregation said, well, actually, Thomas Becket was a bit of a troublemaker. So anyway, so there's more to it.
He wasn't particularly keen on the state having powers over the church. And I think one of the major contentions was that he didn't want civil courts to have power over clergy.
So one of my churches here is St Thomas Becket, which is wrong. It shouldn't be our Becket, but it is. But that's the church that is the ruin and has no roof.
Most relevant for this episode, I think
Yes.
the one thing most people know about Thomas Becket is how he died.
Yes.
In which he was assassinated. And the kind of dramatic, kind of the fictional retelling of this is that the king shouted out, well, no one rid me of this troublesome priest. And then 2 crusaders went and did the job.
I feel that you failed in ministry if no one says, will anyone rid me of this troublesome priest?
Yes, indeed. I quite aspire to be. I would aspire to be a troublesome priest.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, so they reflect on that as part of it, don't they? And yeah, Blackadder's desperate not to be the next one who gets the chop, but his dad accidentally sends assassins after him.
Yeah. Which is weird, because when Blackadder actually is the Archbishop, he's got quite a nice life going for him, really. They work out, he gets Percy also made a bishop, and his servant Baldric is made a brother as well, a monk. And they sort of work out how they can make money.
Yeah, they're looking through the
being the
relics to
Archbishop.
flog, aren't they?
Relics and pardons and indulgences, oh my.
Yeah.
Oh my,
absolutely.
and curses as well, in which someone might have an onion dropped on their head. And actually this is, although it's all very silly, it is also actually quite a good commentary, and one of the reasons for the Reformation was this sort of corruption and the selling of indulgences, which is basically the selling of absolution for certain sins.
Yeah,
basically.
do what you like and the priest will pay for you, but you got to give him money first.
Yeah.
I've got to say, one of the things that I found most, not distracting, but it was something that I just noticed, I suppose, about Rowan Atkinson's performance as the Blackadder. Because he's very sort of sycophantic and subservient. He's always kind of sort of making, wonderfully funny faces and sort of bowing over. And it really reminded me of Gillian Anderson's performance as Margaret Thatcher in The Crown. Like, every now and again, there was a certain turn of the head. I was like, oh my goodness, it's Margaret Thatcher.
Well, Rowan Atkinson is a master of the craft, and clearly has inspired many a generation.
Yeah, Margaret Thatcher didn't have quite as impressive a codpiece as Blackadder, though, I would say.
No, indeed.
Not strong
The
enough
Black
to
Russian
hang a
codpiece.
mitre.
Let me tell you a story about quoting about the codpiece, where unfortunately things did. There was a very embarrassing moment during my gap year where we were quoting Blackadder and ended up questioning someone about the size of their codpiece without even thinking about it.
Oops.
Referring to this scene where he's choosing which codpiece to wear.
Rule
Running the
number
risk
one
of
of
sexual
clergy.
harassment cause
Absolutely.
I know,
I've been on a safeguarding
terrible.
training today, and I know you should not ask people about their codpiece.
You should never ask people about their codpieces, even if you're quoting Blackadder.
But what you can ask people about are their favourite vestments.
Yes.
And we...
Well recovered, Ross. I have a really lovely story about vestments, because this Blackadder's, when he's made Archbishop, he's quite keen on the vestments, isn't it? And vestments is basically the clothing of clergy and the kind of things that we wear. And this past weekend, I've had a very complicated but really interesting funeral. And as part of it, so the lady who died was a theologian and has written lots of books, and her wife was from the States. And we had lots of complicated things to work out because there was a priest who was part of the Episcopal Church that we wanted to come over and do part of the funeral with me, which we ended up managing to do, although she had to do it in a non-priestly role because of the paperwork and all this kind of stuff. But what was really lovely is this lady, Margaret Rose, who is just, she's become one of my favourite people already. She gifted me one of her stoles as part of this. She brought over her stole to wear as part of the service, so she would be involved in it in a different way. And she gave, at the end of this, she said, "Why don't you keep my stole? You know, I love giving things to people. And it comes from Jerusalem." And it was just like,
Gosh.
I nearly cried. I was like, "Oh, thank you very much. It's a beautiful stole." So I now have the stole of an Episcopal priest, which makes it very, very special.
It does make it very
Absolutely.
special. Well, it's like how I use my granddad's stoles.
Yeah.
It's just a lovely connection there.
Yeah, and I think we would all say we rather like our vestments in different ways. I think in general, I would rather just wear a dog collar than all the robes and everything like that. But I've said before about making my stoles and having the significance of making them and the thought process that goes into it. But they are a kind of special part of what we wear and represents us as priests and clergy in the Church of England.
Exactly. I mean, and I've even made my own chasubles, partly for warmth because it's so cold in my churches and I needed more layers.
Have you
But
got
there is
fur-lined chasubles, Kate?
Fur-lined.
Well, there's a whole like fleece to go underneath the chasuble.
Nice.
A whole other layer makes me extremely wide, but that's okay because it's warm and it has a hidden pocket for a hot water bottle.
That's what you need.
Well done.
But if you don't know what a chasuble is, it's
Holy
basically
poncho.
a holy poncho.
Priests wear it at Holy Communion.
Yeah, priests wear. Yeah, it's Eucharistic.
And what have we learnt about wearing a chasuble?
Everyone looks sexy in one.
Absolutely. That was something we were taught at theological college. And everyone looks sexy. in
Well,
a
I mean, I think we quickly need to caveat that we were not taught in a lecture by our lecturers that everyone looks sexy in a chasuble. It was a wonderful bit of banter that came out from a lecture about vestments that everyone looks sexy in a chasuble. But I guess the truth remains.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And it was.
And that's why Blackadder likes it, isn't it?
And it's why.
Not that he looks sexy.
At the end of the episode, where he's found his reason to be excommunicated, and his excuse is that he was seduced by the vestments.
Who hasn't?
Quickly popping back into Fleabag from a couple of episodes ago.
Oh, yeah.
The priest there jokes that he was only ever in it for the robes.
Yeah, they go vestment shopping, don't they?
Yeah.
There is something very special about the robes, and when you find the robes that properly work for you, there is something like I think partly it's not having to worry about how you are dressed in terms of I've got to iron my shirt, I've got to wear a suit or whatever, but actually here I am in this white thing. Yeah.
When I was a curate, I was at a sort of liberal Catholic, I suppose, church. So the expectation was black clergy shirts was part of the uniform. But whilst I was there, I did a placement at a more evangelical church, and the anxiety around what do I wear in the morning was enough to sell me on black clergy shirts.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But what's lovely being at Salisbury Cathedral is that we get we've got our own colours of cassock. We don't do black cassocks here at Salisbury Cathedral. We do kind of like a peacock green cassock. Yeah, it's really fancy, and I don't actually know why yet. I need to find that out.
Is that why you applied for this job,
yeah.
Ross? You were like, "Ooh, peacock green." I'd look fabulous.
It's why I'm a priest, Ruby.
Just the whole
I'm in it for the costumes.
And indeed, if you particularly love purple, that's why you might want to be a bishop, because purple is the forbidden colour for anyone other than bishops.
Yeah, I'm not.
I had a terrible moment, Reese. In my new job, I help out with our education department, and we have school trips, and we tell the story of how Salisbury Cathedral was built, and we get sometimes volunteers will help to tell the story, and a volunteer will usually take the role of Bishop Richard Poor, who was the Bishop of Salisbury when they wanted to move the cathedral from Old Sarum to where it is now. And the last time we had a school trip, I played Bishop Richard Poor, and I had to put on the mitre and walk with the crook. And I did not like what my ego did to me, which is evidence enough that I should never become a bishop.
Yeah, bishops, they get all the best additions. They get the cope, they get which is basically a cape, and they get mitre, which is the hat that's supposed to look like flames, and they get the big stick.
But mitre's not great if you wear your hair up. Like, that's a hair down outfit, isn't it? Having a hat on. So if you like tying your hair up, then it's not very good for you as a mitre. You'd have to adjust your ponytail.
You go for a proper high
to
pony,
mitre height.
like an Ariana Grande pony.
Or like a bun at the top, and just tuck it inside
or just
your mitre.
adapt mitres. I mean, they started off as like battle sort of helmety type things. I think was their original thing. They're not a holy thing.
Oh really?
But they have become a holy symbol.
I thought it was Holy Spirit flames.
Yeah, I thought it was meant to be flames of the Holy Spirit.
No, I think that's what we've added to it to make it work.
Oh. So could we have it like a baseball cap, where we just have a little hole at the back?
That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking we adapt it and make it a baseball cap hat for ponytails and long hair.
We are just adding to the evidence of why we should never be bishops.
We should also get a peak across the front for when it's like, sunny days.
And wear it side on for when you're doing youth ministry.
Absolutely.
Anyway, that's all about vestments.
It's all about vestments. Let's talk a bit about some theology, maybe, or not.
Well, I mean, okay, so maybe we can talk a bit about how... I mean, we've seen Blackadder be made an archbishop in a day, but we know that it does not take a day to become even a deacon or a priest. So how about we talk a little bit about how would one become an archbishop today? What are the steps that one might need to take?
Well, we've each kind of given our story of ordination process, haven't we? And in our kind of little interviews that we've all done of how we became deacons and then priests and the process that we've been through with that. Since we've been through the process, it's changed a bit though, hasn't it? I'm a bit out of the loop now though. What do you have to do now?
Well, you still meet with your diocesan director of ordinance, the DDO, and they talk you through... Or is
it DAV now?
Well, I think it may differ from place to place.
So
DAV is Diocesan Advisor on Vocation, or
ours is a DDVO, the Diocesan Director of Vocational something.
Basically, it's a different name for people who are exploring what they might be called to do, and that could be reader ministry, that could be becoming part of an order, so a monk or a nun or this kind of thing, or it could involve many other things, or it could involve becoming ordained. It's not just for wannabe vicars.
And there are various criteria that they will check you against. Now, when we were going through the process, there were 9, but I think they've dropped one. I think it's 8 now. I can't remember which one they dropped. Maybe even fewer than that. And when we went through the process...
Maybe it's like Blackadder, you don't have to believe in God anymore.
And then you go... When we went to selection conference, they were called Bishops' Advisory Panels. Camply referred to as BAPs.
BAPs.
But they're no longer BAPs. They're now Stage 1 and Stage 2.
Yeah.
which I think is terribly boring and dull. And we had to give a presentation on something that we were passionate about and then lead a discussion off the back of that. But that's been cut, and now you are part of a PCC-type discussion.
Oh.
Sorry.
Well, no, my response exactly, Kate. And without wanting to be too critical of the tenure of our current Archbishop, Justin Welby, it does feel like a lot of the personal passion of calling has been replaced with this kind of CEO level, quite corporate, this is what matters. Not who you are and what you're passionate about, but how good are you at being in a meeting?
Ooh.
Yeah, I think one of the main things when we were going through selection, and particularly our personal presentations, they were very much supposed to be mission-based. And linking something you're passionate about with one of the marks of mission. So I think I chose to talk about working in an interfaith chaplaincy, which I was at the time, and talking about how you proclaim the gospel while in that sort of context when you're interfaith and multi-faith. And I think someone else was talking about having post offices in church.
Oh,
yeah, cool. Yeah. What did you
What
do
did
your
you
talk
do?
about, Ruthie?
I talked about the 5 marks of mission and films and how you could explore the 5 marks of mission through different films, which is something that I keep talking about anyway, because I just love movies. But I think I involved, like, Finding Nemo was one of them, and they weren't just Disney ones, but I think there were quite a few. WALL-E was about safeguarding the integrity of creation. And about kind of discussion questions you could have. And I was really encouraged after mine, because after I'd done mine, a few of the other candidates came up and said, "Could you just give me those films again and the topics? Because that'd be a really good light course for us." And I was a bit like, yes, smashed it. So, yeah.
Maybe we should make that another episode, Ruthie.
Do my faith and film.
Or a series.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We could do a series of episodes. For next, between Christmas and Lent, maybe. What about Ross? What did you talk about?
Well, it's funny you say that. I met someone who I knew about 10 years ago, who's a vicar, and I was talking it through with him, and I was like, I think I want to talk about storytelling in the church. And he said, why don't you tell a story?
Ooh.
So I took one of my Beatitude fairy tales and I cut it down to make it 5 minutes long. And I told the story of the farmer and his headache.
Classic.
Which is based on... Classic. I told it to my font service community this Sunday just gone. It was really good fun. It's based on one of Jesus' Beatitudes, listeners. So I told that, and then we had a conversation about the dangers of storytelling in church. It was fun. I really enjoyed it. And
I've just looked up.
But anyway, the process for if you do want to be made a vicar, if you want to become a vicar, if you want to go into ministry now, it's a quite a long process. It's not just kind of someone points at you and says, you're going to be Archbishop. It's very much it all begins with where you are in your home parish and what you're doing there, and talking to your vicar or other people around you, and taking those opportunities to start to explore things like preaching and leading home groups and all of that. And then, as you're prayerfully discussing it with those people who know you well, and with your vicar and other people, then saying, we think there is something here and we want to go forward with this. And so then you talk to your diocesan link person, whether that's your director of vocations or director of ordinance or whatever you want to call them. And then you start this process to go through selection, which is now in 2 stages. And there's an opportunity where they'll say, actually, after stage 1, you're approved. But they might say, but we want to delay it until X has happened in your life, or Y, or whatever. And then you go forward for stage 2. I think for some other people, it can happen quite quickly still, though.
There's a very pretty picture now of how people do it, and it talks about stage 1 and stage 2. But I was wondering what the factors were for what they required as part of it. And for a priest, they reflect on it as in connection with Christ, church, world, and self. And the thing you have to look at is love for God, call to ministry, love for people, wisdom, fruitfulness, and potential. And those are the new categories as part of it. But maybe on socials we'll put up the images of the thing, because it isn't just as easy as going, oh, I fancy doing this. I look quite good in black. Why don't I become a vicar? Actually, the whole process for me, from that initial call of starting to think that I might be called to ordain ministry, that was in November 2007, and I was ordained in July 2016. So that was 9 years of process. That includes training and stuff like that as well. That whole process took that long for me.
Yeah, about the same for me as well, because I started really recognising the call when I was 17, and I got ordained when I was 27.
Yeah.
So, but for some people it doesn't take that long. And I really like those categories you named for the stages, because I think the ones for us, there was quality of mind.
Yes,
was one
it
of them.
Was.
And was theology?
Yeah.
No, there's
No,
no
that's
theology.
part of quality of mind.
No.
Mission, that was the
Mission
presentation.
evangelism.
Pastoral.
Yeah.
We had to do an exercise where there was a mock pastoral letter.
Yes.
Where you were given a scenario and had to write a pastoral letter. And I think my feedback from that was something like, she's relatively pastoral, or something like that. Which my bishop says, you've been damned with faint praise
Oh,
here.
bless you. Yeah. So these are all the processes that we now have to go through in order to do it. And the reason it's so vigorous in some ways is because there has been a history of, if you came from the right family, you went to the right church, you had the right education, you would get ordained. And that misses a whole load of people who would be absolutely cracking priests, but don't have that, should we say, white middle class background.
Yeah. Or people who have all of those qualities, but actually they're just not called to be priests. They're called to something else. And you can be faithful, and you can love God, and you can love people, and you could be missional, but actually being a priest would limit you, and it isn't the best expression of your calling. But then moving on, then how do you become a bishop and how do you become an archbishop? We talked about being a bishop in the Geraldine, when Geraldine goes forward for being a bishop.
Didn't we?
We talked about that women bishops.
Yeah,
the Vicar of Dibley episode. There's a list, and one is invited to interview, to be a bishop, and it's all hush hush.
But
well, there's something called the Crown Nominations Committee. And the Crown Nominations Committee are appointed by General Synod, I believe. And then there are various other people who are sort of the secretaries to that group. And they are appointed to do the work of the king in appointing bishops to various sees and dioceses around the country. I do think that is primarily diocesan posts.
I think it is for all of them, isn't it? Because it always comes out from Downing Street, doesn't it? That the king has approved the appointment of, or it's been the Queen most recently, and then it would say the name of the bishop.
Yeah.
But like when Justin Welby became Archbishop of Canterbury, he hadn't been a bishop very long, had he?
No. Bishop of
Durham.
Coventry.
Durham?
No, it's Durham.
Was it Durham? He was Dean at Coventry and then Bishop of Durham for, a year and a half or something?
Yeah, it was really short before he became Archbishop of Canterbury. But there is, vigorous questioning to make sure.
Well, there have been some changes to how the next Archbishop of Canterbury will be appointed. When I was on General Synod, it was something that was under discussion and debate. And
give us the goss.
It was something I voted against, actually. So there was this big conversation was about the role and status of the Archbishop of Canterbury, and kind of what is the Archbishop of Canterbury's job description. And during especially Justin Welby's tenure, it's become a much more globally active role across the Anglican Communion. But that's not actually necessarily part of the Archbishop of Canterbury's job.
Oh, isn't it? I would have assumed it was.
I mean, the idea is that the Archbishop of Canterbury is sort of first among equals.
Right.
But it's not. I don't think it's an active part of the job description. It's kind of like that sort of be a diplomatic role across the Anglican Communion or something like that, perhaps. But the argument was that more representatives of the Anglican Communion should play a part in choosing who the next Archbishop of Canterbury should be.
Oh, right, I see.
But that has huge implications on the fact that you got the See of Canterbury. You know, he is a diocesan bishop, as well as being the Archbishop. And then you actually do get a lot of political mind games being played when you've suddenly it's like, well, actually, which churches of the Anglican Communion are going to be representing the Anglican Communion, and will people be satisfied if they do or don't share their theological viewpoints? So it was something that I voted against because I didn't like the process by which we were voting. I don't know that we know what the Archbishop of Canterbury is in the future, and I don't like the idea that we're saying this is what we want the next Archbishop of Canterbury to be doing. Anyway.
Yeah, I think it raises questions about the Anglican Communion, and I think we're in danger if we go down that route of essentially setting the Archbishop of Canterbury up as Pope of the Anglican Communion. Whereas actually that's not what the Archbishop meant to do. He's supposed to be first among equals, and I would prefer kind of greater decentralisation there. And actually, but anyway, let's not go too far down that route. I think it's one of those interesting things. You know, we're not entirely clear how someone is made Archbishop. I think it's very exciting that we will live through the appointment of a new Archbishop of Canterbury.
I don't think we'll ever have a female Archbishop of Canterbury in our ministry, our time that we're ordained.
Yeah, I would be
because
surprised.
of that Anglican
Archbishop
Communion
of York.
thing.
I think we could.
Archbishop of York,
Yeah.
yes, we could have a female
I think we could.
Archbishop of York, but I don't think we'll have an female Archbishop of Canterbury, which is sad.
Let's pray that we may see. that we may, maybe
Lord
we will,
move.
maybe.
But
Pray.
let's thinking about archbishops. Have any of us got archbishop stories? I've got quite a few.
Yeah.
I do as well.
Which archbishops have we met then? Come on, let's do the bingo card. Who's met Rowan?
I've met Rowan
I've met
and
Rowan.
Centenary. And I've stayed in Lambeth Palace. Ooh.
Okay, so Kate's on 2, but has stayed in a palace. How about you, Ross?
Well, I want to hear how about you first, Ruthie?
Oh, okay. Are you trying to outdo me? I have
know
met
it.
3 archbishops.
I've also met 3 archbishops and a pope.
Oh, you can't pull the Pope card on us.
Yeah, I can.
You always play this card.
Well, Ruthie, you were saying about how you lived in France. I lived in Rome for a little bit.
You went to Rome? Yeah.
So I met Justin Welby and the Pope at the same time.
Wait, no, I've also met the Archbishop of Hong Kong. There you go.
Oh, there we go.
And he invited me to sit next to him in a Bible study and encouraged me to apply for a job there. So there we go.
Oh, there you go.
Very much. And actually, just as an aside, what's really interesting is in different provinces, actually, the way bishops are nominated is by a vote of synod. So it's worth noting that we've been talking about how things happen in the Church of England, but
because we're still church and state, whilst in most places around the world, the church is distinct from the state.
So this lady who gave me her stole is part of the Archbishop of the Episcopal Church's staff. So Reverend Dr. Michael Curry is her boss. So
Amazing.
Yeah. So yeah, that'll have been a different rule for him to be appointed. He was so great at the royal wedding. It's just what a dude. But yes, I was ordained by an archbishop. As were you, Ross, were you? No, you weren't. Sorry.
No, I was
awkward.
No.
Sorry.
Actually, I will have met more, because I have met 2 Archbishops of York, Sentamu and Cottrell.
Yeah.
I've met Rowan briefly, Welby,
He's
and then
on
at
4.
Synod, I'm on 4, and then you mentioned Hong Kong. I don't know that I've necessarily I've certainly been in the room with an Archbishop from South America. She was very cool.
Yeah.
But I can't say that I met her. We were just in the same room.
Yeah.
In general, you don't meet your archbishop much. I think we've been all in quite unique circumstances. You may have, you should have a really good working relationship with your bishop and perhaps your diocesan bishop. It just so happened, because I was an ordinand in York Diocese and was a curate in York itself, at that time, Archbishop Sentamu was Bishop of York, and so was really keen on engaging with his clergy and his curates at that time. So that's how I knew Sentamu, through that. And then in my previous job, we were based at Bishopthorpe Palace some of the time, which is where Archbishop of York is. And so got to know Stephen through some of those things like that. And I just happened to be in a unique position where I managed to meet them and chat to them through things. My meeting of Archbishop Welby was because a friend of mine became a bishop, and I went to Lambeth Palace afterwards for the do. And he just, I was chatting to someone who actually knows him quite well, and he just kind of cropped up and wanted to talk to the person I was talking with. And I was a bit kind of like, oh, it's the Archbishop. And I was, oh, goodness, okay, behave yourself. And that was my variety of my interaction. I think most priests may have briefly met archbishops, but don't have a particular relationship with them unless one of their siblings is a godchild to an archbishop.
Yes, so my eldest sibling is godchild to Rowan Williams. My dad trained, when he trained for ordination, Rowan Williams was his tutor, and he also met Sentamu at that point. So my kind of knowing Sentamu, I use know very loosely because he has confused me with my eldest sibling. On one occasion we probably had a conversation where he said, oh yes, I knew you when you were a baby. Which he didn't. I sort of turned to my parents and said, did really? But no. And I've just realised I probably have met Welby, but in passing when my dad was consecrated bishop. Yeah. But that's when I stayed in Lambeth Palace, and I had a bath in Lambeth Palace.
Of course you did.
Because they didn't have any showers.
Of course you did. Why wouldn't you? If you're in Lambeth Palace, if I'd ever been invited to stay at Bishopthorpe, I would have been like, nicking a bit of loo roll.
Yeah.
Honestly.
But I feel like knowing Rowan Williams is a bit of a cheat because he is a family friend and he has been so encouraging across my whole ministry. Really, when I was living in Hong Kong, there was a point where he was going to be coming out and suggested that we meet for dinner. It didn't happen, but then when I was on placement in Hong Kong later, he was there and we met then again.
This has been an episode where we've all name dropped the exotic places we've lived and studied. My time in Paris, your time in Rome, my time in Hong Kong.
We're just name dropping the archbishops we know and the places we've lived.
We're well connected.
We are fairly extraordinary. It's not
in so many ways.
That, clergy have these connections.
And to be fair, none of us have, like Geraldine, had the Archbishop turn up at our house when we've been covered in chocolate from a chocolate fountain.
Not yet. Still time.
Not yet.
That's such a classic episode of Vicar Dibley.
Such a great episode.
Where she's in the chocolate fountain and the actor is supposed to be playing Rowan Williams, isn't he? And turns up and she invites him to lick
Rowan
her.
Williams. Feel free to lick me.
Yeah.
Amazing. So we've had a bit of a romp.
That's a good word for
That
it.
feels
Name
very
dropping,
appropriate for Blackadder.
Doing some low-key bragging, talking a bit about vocations, and a bit about Blackadder. If you think that you might be called to ministry, give it a go. You know, pray about it, talk to your vicar, talk to those people who know you well, but be bold in putting yourself forward, because you might be the next best thing for the church.
And if you can out Archbishop any of us, do let us know.
Please tell us. If you are an Archbishop and you've been covertly listening to us.
Stephen and Justin, lovely to hear you listening in. Come on the pod.
After some of the things that I said, I don't know that we're getting any invitations anytime soon.
Yeah. And actually, dear listeners, if you do want us to try and get on the pod some kind of people like, you know, bishops and archbishops, we've named that we have a couple of connections there.
We know.
If that's something you'd be interested in, please do let us know.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Vicars Watch Dibley. Thank you to Nat for editing our ramblings.
Any opinions expressed are our own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Church of England or any other organisation with which we are affiliated.
If you like our podcast, leave us a review, follow us on social media and share it with your friends. And, as always, bless you for listening.
So instead of a joke this week, you're getting the story of how the phrase "the actress said to the bishop" came about. But it's from Wikipedia, so just bear with, okay? It supposedly originated from a conversation between the actress Lily Langtry and the Bishop of Worcester. They were at a country house weekend party, and on Sunday morning before church, they went for a stroll in the garden. On their walk, the bishop cut his finger on a rose thorn. Over lunch, Lily inquired about his injury, asking, "How is your prick?" To which the bishop replied, "Throbbing," causing the butler to drop the potatoes.
I love it.